up when the sun goes down. Neighbor says the smell's too loud. Riding in my old school thing.
Hi, Mr Moriarty. Thanks so much for meeting with us. So, first question is this. Do you practice mindfulness, and do you think that it is important for people to practice?
That's a good question, and I think the definition of what mindfulness actually means is kind of quite loose. So, do I practice mindfulness in a kind of with a capital M? No, but I do. I guess there's various things that would come within the general area. I mean, believe it or not, on my way to school in the morning, I say my prayers. Just a kind of routine and stuff, with a few bits that I'm thinking about in particular. But I think of that as a way of setting my agenda for the day and trying to get some space where I'm thinking not about what I've got to do today, what happened yesterday, or all of those sorts of things, but trying to get my mind outside of that space. So I think it's very important for people to find something like that that works for them. And what works for one person won't necessarily work for another. But the idea that we take some point in each day, or as often as we can, where we say, I'm going to try and set aside the everyday minutiae and do something different that gives perspective. That seems to be really important.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there are other things in the kind of broader picture of what I do to support mental health. I'm not sure that I do it all that well, but it seems to me laughing is probably one of the most important things, and there's a lot of that goes on in this office, and a lot of it that goes on, you know, in my life elsewhere where I can. You know, trying to get out for a walk. Ridiculous how hard that is, but that's something I would try to do. You know, trying to keep up with friends and all those sorts of things. Probably for me, that daily, it's probably only 5 minutes of sort of prayerful, meditative, mindfulness-y stuff. Trying to laugh a lot and trying to get out in the open air. Those are my most important things.
I guess
got to find their own way.
If they help you, you know, then
right.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
Do you think that there is a stigma surrounding mental health and well-being?
100% there is. I think it's getting better. A few years ago, I don't know how long ago it was, 3 or 4 years ago, I went through a quick conversation with as many form groups in the school as I could. I don't know what year group we were in at the time. But I made exactly that point. You know, why should it be any different having a broken leg or flu from having the mental and emotional equivalent of those things? And yet, people will happily talk about even quite intimate personal complaints of a physical nature, but they're much less comfortable. There's a lot more shame, there's a lot more hiding, there's a lot more mystique and fear, I think, surrounded. If you even kind of intimate that you might be having something like a mental illness, people start to think, well, you're crazy, or you're likely to be violent, and none of those are the case. There are temporary mental illnesses just as there are temporary physical illnesses. There are serious ones on both sides, there are trivial ones on both sides, and there is what you might call self-help that you can do in both cases. You know, there is the mental equivalent of exercise and healthy eating that we can do, and I guess that's really what mindfulness is, and what a school wellbeing provision needs to do. It needs to be almost giving us self-help mechanisms for keeping on top of the everyday stresses and strains that we feel, as much physically as mentally. So 100% there's a stigma, and if this conversation now helps to try in its tiny way to help that, I'm totally in favour of it.
Obviously, so our aim for the project is getting rid of the stigma. We want to make it much more mainstream in the school, to be able to talk about your feelings, be able to, express yourself, express to your friends.
We kind of want it to be just there at JCoSS rather than having to push it. We just want people to it to be the normality.
Yeah.
So we think that that our proposed reforms of the wellbeing system would really help, to make a change. So that brings us to our next question. How would you like to see people address wellbeing more in JCoSS?
Actually, I'm just glad you're doing the project you're doing, because I can come up with all manner of wonderful plans and they may have no impact on students, because you are the people having the experiences, and you are probably better placed to know what might work, what might not work, what we're already doing that isn't working at all, and what things could be changed. So I almost don't want to answer the question. I do think schools in general are better than the rest of society in talking about well-being. And I do think, particularly at the moment, Jewish schools are probably better than some, and that's partly because of the way the community operates and the way that the schools interact with the community. But I think it's also because of the project that Jessica, you will know if you haven't spoken to her yet, you need to.
Of course, yeah.
That funded project within all the community schools, or several of the community schools, just says, here is a considerable investment of money and time and people. So I think we are, however much we may need to carry on changing, I think we are probably as good as most other schools. So what we're talking about is making it even better than it is. And I think it's got to be a variety, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all. Some of it will be in lesson time, some of it will be in kind of additional provisions that Jessica or others around the school can put on. Some of it will be about counselling, some of it will be about signposting people who need it onto other and more specialised services. But I guess that as much as anything, none of that will work unless actually the relationships are right within the school. So I know we go on and on about the mensch idea, but part of what's at the root of that is if we can recognise the humanity in each other's, if we can recognise, that person's having a bad day, that's why they're talking to me in the way that they are, I need to make allowances for that, and I need to approach whatever difficulties they're having with as much humanity as I can, and hopefully they will to me, and we can all just try to, well, it sounds a bit oversimple, but we just be kind to each other. An awful lot of well-being is hidden within just being patient and being kind with each other. So I think there's all sorts of layers. I think we're going to come on to talk about, kvutsa. There might be an element in there. Some of it we need to be physically teaching. This is a technique you can use that will make that can help you avoid anxiety or help you get over a panic attack. Some of those are just techniques, and it seems to me schools absolutely can and should be doing those things. But I want to keep stressing it's partly about the content of lessons, it's partly about the details of practical provision, but a lot of it is about the culture and the ethos and the relationships and the conversations that we have.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you support the idea of a radio show which would promote well-being, or a space for well-being, i.e. a separate room for people to practice mindfulness?
All of those, both of those could definitely work. Space is a problem, it's always a problem here. Particularly in the sixth form, just how difficult the space is at the minute. But absolutely, if I had loads and loads of space, I would definitely want to set up. What would I do? It might be that you set aside a room as a sort of contemplative space that might be, for some people, more about prayer, and for some people it might be more about chilling out, for some people it might be more about mindfulness, but some kind of dedicated space that is never going to get booked up for, a catch-up session or a French oral, or that's like a sanctuary, you might almost say. There we go, it's a religious word. I think that's a good idea. I doubt it's going to be possible, especially now, but I think it's a very good idea. And so the school I went to as a student, it was a school that had a chapel, but it wasn't a kind of holy chapel. It was a chapel with religious symbols all over the walls from all sorts of religions, and people just used it as a place to sit. It was never going to get used for anything. It was calm. And people used it for that reason. So if I had a magic wand, that's something I would definitely do. As for the radio station, terrific. Sounds a great idea. Just any ways that will get people, well, as you were saying earlier, that will kind of cut through the stigma or say, this is totally normal. This is what all of us feel, probably some point every day. And some of us go through troughs of weeks and months or even years where we really struggle with these things, just as we do with our physical health, so with our mental health. So the more we can talk about it, the better it is. So I'm behind you on that.
Great. Yeah, because like our plan is we're going to do a radio show. We're going to have celebrities and influencers on there. So
This is like a podcast, or
Yeah,
a live
it's
It's
podcast?
like a podcast with some content and music. It's like a platform, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it'll be on YouTube, be on Spotify.
Yeah.
We might even be able to get it in form time. You know, it's
Brilliant.
depends on public on the student reception.
Right. But the fact that it's kind of student-led,
Yeah.
you're getting in
Yeah.
content from all sorts of people, but it's the students who've got the finger on the pulse of what's actually going on, because your mental health concerns are going to
It's kind of a way of just expressing yourself and
Yeah.
finding new ways to do so.
right, and encouraging new kinds of conversation that break down stigma and just help us all to be more at ease with the whole aspects of our own backstories, other people's backstories, and get towards flourishing into who we can be.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you
You're
so
very
much,
welcome.
though. We really
It's been really
appreciate it.
interesting.
Right, more power to you. Brilliant.